What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today, we're talking the elitist episode of WWE Table for Three, entitled Ladies Luncheon, featuring Carmella, Mandy Rose, and Tori Wilson. A bit of a fun fact for you, I did not know how to properly pronounce Luncheon until right before I recorded this episode. I'm a fucking journalist, and I didn't know how to pronounce the word. Because if you read it like as it is, it looks like it would say Luncheon, but it's actually Luncheon, which makes way more sense. But for whatever reason, I've always thought it was Luncheon, and I didn't want to come across like a dumbass. I guess I am now because I'm admitting that I didn't know how it was pronounced until just recently, until 2 seconds ago. But whatever. Such is life. So this was a bit of a weird mishmash of women to have on one episode, just because they have there's no real relation here between any of them. I know Carmella and Mandy Rose are currently on SmackDown together, but it's not like they're partners like Mandy and Sonya are. Tori Wilson has no relation to either of them. And Carmella, I was going to say, they're all blonde, but Carmella at this point was still a brunette. She had not gone back to being blonde until like a few weeks later, because this was recorded over WrestleMania weekend. Why it's airing now and not months ago, I have no idea. But it's not like it's outdated, just because outside of the Hall of Fame talk, they don't really talk about anything that's like all that recent, you know? This was kind of one of the weaker episodes of Table for Three in recent memory, just because it was a good episode, but there was no relation between any of them. And all the talk about, how far the women have come and all that other stuff is great, but I feel like we've heard it a million different times from a million different women that have more in common than these three do. And, I just thought it was weird. But to kick off the episode, Tori does talk about her Hall of Fame induction that night. She initially said to Mark Carrano when he called her to be a part of the Hall of Fame, he had just asked her if she was open that weekend, and she thought that he was asking her to be a part of WrestleMania weekend, and she kind of blew him off at first, saying, "Hey, I'm busy, don't call me about this, blah, blah, blah," kind of being a bit of a dick. And then he goes, "Well, you're probably going to want to make yourself available because you will be inducted into the Hall of Fame." She's like, "I could be there," which I thought was funny. She does have to remind herself, she says, that it's a completely different time now, and she admires the athleticism of today's women, because back then it wasn't really about the athleticism, and Tori Wilson made it work for what it was back in the day, but I could not give you one memorable, at least for the right reasons, Tori Wilson match from 2002 onward. I know she was around in the company for a while, but she never had one really good match, and maybe that's because the company never gave her a chance to have a really good match, but I feel like if you're around in the company for so long and you can't have one above average match, that's a bit of a problem. So I'm not even sure if she was around today, she would be able to hang with the likes of Charlotte and Sasha and Bayley and Becky and, Ember Moon and all these other ladies. But anyway, she said it was a different time back then. Mandy thought, talking about her upbringing in the business, she thought she would give Tough Enough a shot. And that's how she broke into WWE. Carmella got into wrestling because her dad was a wrestler back in the early 90s. Her dad's name was like Paul Van Dale or something along those lines. She danced originally, and she cheered. She was a cheerleader in the NBA for a while. I think it was the NBA. Either the NBA or the NFL, either one. And then she tried out for WWE about 5-6 years ago. She got signed, and here we are today. Tori Wilson got into the business because her boyfriend at the time, 20 years ago or so, was a wrestling fan. And I think they went to a WCW show, and Kevin Nash, of all people, pulled her out of the crowd because he recognized her from a fitness magazine photo shoot. And he said, "Hey, we need some woman for this storyline with Ric Flair. Would you be interested?" Initially, she wasn't all that sold on it, but she needed the money, so she said yes, and her career took off from there. And they talk about how it was shocking to their bodies at first, because when you first break into wrestling, you really have, your body's not used to the bumps your body's taking. So, it was shocking to the bodies at first, and it took a while for them to get used to it. And Carmella and Mandy talk about talk about how the locker room is now, and how it's really not as vicious or how aggressive or walking on eggshells it was, similar to back when it was 20 years or so ago when Tori Wilson was around. Maybe not 20 years ago, but like 15 years ago. Tori Wilson said there was a lot of pressure from the men and the management and people like that 15 years ago when she was coming up in WWE. Carmella and Mandy, maybe they're just, obviously they're on camera, so they won't say otherwise, but they say it's a much more friendly environment, a much friendlier environment now than it was years ago, and everyone's willing to help each other, everyone's friendly with each other, everyone's on good terms, and it's not a matter of, oh, you're taking my spot. Like, that mentality, according to them anyway, is largely gone. And again, it might still be there, but they're not going to say that on camera. But they say that you really have to gain your respect in NXT. You really have to be asked to get changed in the locker room, but before that, you kind of change on your own. You kind of get changed on your own in a bathroom in another part of the arena. That's what NXT is all about, gaining that respect, earning that respect. Mandy says that at a time after she got signed by WWE back in 2015, she was kind of immediately thrown into the fire on Total Divas. And it was it was weird because there was no one else that was new to WWE on that show at that time. I mean, Paige was there, but she'd already been with WWE for years. The Bella Twins and a number of other people. I remember that season. She was on for one season, and then that was it. But she did admit that the show helped her grow. Mandy and Carmella said they were in NXT for about 2 years, and they constantly think about where they were then to where they are now, because back when they were in NXT, which was only about a 2-year time period, but it was all about when are we getting to the main roster? When are we getting to the main roster? And now it's like, wow, look how far we've come. Constantly traveling, winning championships on every show, every week. And it's crazy for them to think about that evolution from where they started to where they are now. And they also talk about the evolution of the women's division just in general, going from having one women's match on the card 5 years ago to now having 2 or 3 women's matches in one show. Like this Sunday, as I record this, at Clash of Champions, we're getting 3 women's matches on the same show, which is really fucking cool. Tori Wilson said, she's like, oh, it's so awesome you guys have the Performance Center somewhere to train because, when I started in WWE, we didn't have that, obviously. They would learn in the ring before each show, before every episode of Raw, SmackDown, whatever. The trainers, such as the Fit Finley, would teach them a new move or two before the show started. And that would be their training for the day, which is pretty fucking crazy. She talked about that spot where the 2 women in one match would, have this cat fight and start rolling all over each other. They would roll over the referee, and the referee would kind of come up and smile, and the crowd would always eat that shit up. But Tori hated that spot because it was so cliche and it was so overdone. I know exactly what she's talking about. I mean, they showed the footage on this episode of what of what she was alluding to. But I've seen so many old episodes of Raw and SmackDown and pay-per-views to know exactly what she was referencing, because that shit was always fucking done and it was so cliche. It was so stupid. But anyway, she talks about her friendship with Stacy Keibler and how they still keep in contact to this day. Mandy says that she has her Stacy Keibler and Sonya Deville. They're constantly traveling with each other. She's never really had to travel with anyone else but Sonya because they came up together in NXT and then on the main roster. Now they're on SmackDown together. Carmella reveals that she actually travels alone and that she initially traveled with Bayley during their NXT days, but when Bayley... Or they both got called up around the same time, but they've always been on opposite brands until just recently, and this was obviously taped before WrestleMania. She got split from Bayley, and then when she was on SmackDown back in 2016, she started traveling with Natalya, and then Natalya got dropped at a Raw in 2018, so she's back to traveling on her own. Carmella does say it's, a family environment. Everyone's kind of like a brother or sister to each other on the road all the time. She does throw out the idea of Tori and Stacy going for the women's tag team titles. That does not sound all that exciting, to be honest with you. I love Tori Wilson. I love Stacy Keibler. But that sounds like it would be fucking terrible. So hopefully we never have to get that. I'm just being honest here. I think a Tori Wilson, Stacy Keibler team in 2019 would really not be all that entertaining as they make it out to be. But anyway, Carmella talks about the WWE Women's Tag Team titles. She felt like it was the right time to introduce a new set of tag titles for the women. Tori recalls her Royal Rumble return in 2018 and how she feels like she's a lot more athletic now than she was when she left, 10 years ago, and how she feels like she's in better shape now than she's ever been. She also talked about being back for Evolution, that pay-per-view, and just the camaraderie among the women at both shows. My friggin' computer keeps going off, so I apologize if you hear all these notifications. But anyway, they joke about the bras and panties match, and Tori Wilson's like, oh, you didn't really live until you had a bras and panties match, and blah, blah, blah. She brought that up a number of times, but she did say that she always went to Fit Finlay and asked him, how can we make these bras and panties matches as athletic as possible? And they praise Fit Finlay for all the work he's done with the women over the years. Carmella and Mandy say that he's still working with them now, which is really cool. Tori Wilson talked about using her dad for that storyline with Dawn Marie back in the day, how Paul Heyman wanted to incorporate her dad into the storyline, and he gave her an option. Do you want us to bring in an actor, or do you want us to use your real dad? I'm not really sure why they gave her the option, just because the guy had no idea what he was doing. Tori said as much here. He wasn't an established actor. He was completely clueless. But they gave her the option. She said, why not use my own dad? I feel like that'd be a lot cooler. And she says that he had no idea what he was doing, and how she actually says that wrestlers used to be mad at her dad because he was always taking up television time because their storyline was so big and it was so prominent on SmackDown back in late 2002. She actually shared a story about one time he hitched a ride, or tried to hitch a ride anyway. She never found out what ended up happening with that he tried to hitch a ride one time from the hotel with Vince to the TV taping that day. And she was so embarrassed to have him at TV all the time, but it was such a great experience. But he had no idea what he was doing, and it's one of those things where you never want to have your parents around because you feel like they'll embarrass you, and that's exactly what happened with her and her dad when they were traveling together on the road back in 2002-03. And Carmella actually admits that her dad so badly wants to be involved with today's product. Mandy and Tori say, hey, you got to get your dad involved at some point. That'd be cool, blah, blah, blah. Carmella's like, no, not at all. I feel like he's going to come on in and ask for a job. I don't want that at all. Mandy says that, oh, my dad would never do that, but my mom would absolutely be up for appearing on TV alongside me. And Tori says that traveling with WWE helps you, quote, wisen up. And, Mandy puts it in better terms, or it might have been Carmella. I forgot who said it, but yeah, wisen up isn't a real term, obviously. But I've said words that aren't words here on the show either, so I can't blame her. But what she meant by that was broaden your horizons in terms of stuff you get to experience across the world and traveling with WWE and all that other stuff. And now they get to try new things. Mandy Rose said that she never really used to try new things before traveling with WWE. Now she really has no choice because sometimes there are no other options. And they also admit that their parents and people like that don't understand their struggles of not knowing where they're going to sleep some nights and not knowing where they're going to get food and stuff like that. It's a real struggle to be a WWE superstar. And then Tori gets emotional to end off the episode saying that she's so proud to have interacted and been able to talk with and, see the success of women like Carmella and Mandy Rose. They toast to close off the episode. So I thought this was a good episode of Table for Three. By no means must see. Again, the fact there was no tie-in here between any of these women was what kind of hurt it for me. It was a really good conversation, but they spend the entire episode talking about the women's evolution, and that's awesome, but I feel like we've seen that with so many other episodes of Table for Three that this one didn't really make it all that more special, Because I feel like we've seen it before with women that have a reason to be talking about the women's evolution, but Tori Wilson, aside from how she was a part of the Hall of Fame this year, was really not that big of a part of the women's evolution back in the day. Not as much as Trish and Lita and people like that. Molly Holly, who's been on the show before. Mandy Rose and Carmella, just a weird fit. It was a really weird mishmash of women to have on this episode of Table for Three. It was good, but again, by no means must say. And that does it, guys, for my review of the Ladies Luncheon episode of Table for Three. Check it out right now on the WWE Network. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be back at some point with an all-new Network and Chill episode, probably of whatever airs after Raw this coming week. And then 2 new straight-up Steve Austins, the Season 1 finale, or, Episode 6 on Monday, the Season 1 finale on Tuesday. Those reviews are going up as early as Tuesday, and then probably next Friday as well. Until next time, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.